This is live, is it? Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning with LinkedIn legend James Warren, who's absolutely brilliant at sharing his knowledge on LinkedIn, and that's how we came across James in the first place. So I really appreciate him finding the time to do a little webinar for us and our customers or people who follow us on LinkedIn as well. So welcome. A little bit of housekeeping before I pass over to James. So we are SafeMove, and we've been helping our customers for 25 years, nearly 25 years, with their residential and commercial search needs. We offer various searches, and our core product is a Con29DW because we're linked to Yorkshire Water. So any information that you need on public water mains and public sewers will be found in the Con29DW. And James obviously today is talking about private drainage, which is really useful and links in quite well with what we do. So housekeeping wise, if you've got any questions at all, please do pop them in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and I'll ask the questions. We can interrupt James throughout, and the session will be recorded as well. So after the session and before the end of the week, we'll probably send you the recording out together with a little bit of a feedback form as well, which we'll pop in the chat. So if you could complete the feedback form as well, that would be useful because it helps us offer more webinars moving forward and help you guys with your expertise in different areas. That's everything from me, so I shall pass over to James now. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you, Gemma, and thank you, everyone. I know everyone on this webinar is immensely busy, so I genuinely appreciate a bit of your time this morning, especially on this most glamorous of topics of private off-mains drainage. I wasn't very good at drama at school, so any excitement and enthusiasm that comes through on this hour is genuine. This specific world of drainage is all I've ever done. I've been doing it for 27 years, so I'm awful in a pub dynamic. I can bore anyone. Hopefully today, talking about this very specific subject, I could be a little bit useful. So without further ado, we'll jump straight in. I hate death by PowerPoint. So although, yes, there'll be some pointers on each slide, I'm not just going to read them out. I know that bores everyone immensely. So they're there as a prompt. We are going to run through the points on this slide. Today's session is about the general binding rules, but it's also specifically that as of January this year, it was a decade old. And certain things have been tweaked and amended over that 10 years, and awareness has changed. So it's a little bit of an emphasis on then versus now as well, to put some real life context in it. So we'll go through what the general binding rules are, why they're introduced. We'll spend a little bit of time on what a small sewage discharge is, because the full title of this regulatory reform is in fact the Small Sewage Discharge General Binding Rules. And it's very specific, and it means the world of difference in certain dynamics. And we're going to go into that a little bit as well. We'll run through what they mean to property owners served by private off-mains drainage, and then we'll talk through different scenarios of what a non-compliant system is, how one's discovered, who's responsible, and how we put it right. So I'll jump into background, and apologies in advance if you've seen me before or you've seen some of my posts. All this is already out in the public domain, but I'm going to treat everyone as if you've never met me before, you don't know anything about general binding rules. So I'm just going to start from the beginning, and I'll be as quick as I possibly can. So purely in England, this is only an English regulatory reform. DEFRA, in conjunction with the Environment Agency, in January 2015, introduced this regulatory reform to protect the waterways. And this was the catalyst for this entire reform was that there were huge volumes of septic tanks discharging directly into ditches, rivers, streams, any sort of waterway, any sort of surface water, and it needed to be stopped. So as there is no, or was no, and still is no database of where these septic tanks are in England, there was always going to be a bit of a challenge as to how to get this very important message to the very people that needed to know why it was introduced, what it meant to them, how they were going to put it right. So there was a lot of disparity in the early days, as I'm sure you're aware. I'd say for the first couple of years, not many people actually knew that this reform had actually been introduced. So that it has taken almost this full 10 years for the awareness to go through to the very property professionals and asset owners that are involved day to day with these systems and know what to do with the regulations. I'm not going to go through every single rule, and in fact, I'm not even going to go through these five. I've simply put this on the screen to illustrate that there are currently 23 rules that are part of the general binding rules. When they were first introduced in January 15, there was 21. So 1 to 14 were for systems that were pre-existent. Rules 15 to 21 inclusive were for systems that were installed after January 15. And then in October 2023, an additional two rules were implemented, and they were both around the fact that rainwater discharge and foul water discharge couldn't come together in the same point. They had to be separated. Mega boring. We can go on to that if you wish to, but this is just how it looks. And it's either a discharge to surface water or discharge to ground. Discharges to surface water, as we said a moment ago, whether the system goes to a ditch, a river, a stream, and a discharge to ground is fundamentally when it goes to ground into some sort of soakaway or dispersal system. And again, we'll come on to that in a little bit. So to go back one stage, as I do not know how much knowledge everyone has got on this webinar, I'm going to very quickly go through the three different off-mains drainage assets. And I'm going to start with the least environmentally friendly. And you'll wonder why I'm talking about this one, because you'll notice on the left-hand side, we're talking about a cesspit, which is a great big holding tank. There is no exit pipe. On the right-hand side, you can see the inlet pipes. That's taking all the foul and grey water from the property. On the left-hand side of that diagram, there is no exit or outlet pipe. So in default, that means there is no discharge. So we are looking at a perfectly compliant off-mains drainage system, private off-mains drainage system, but this is not covered under the general binding rules because the general binding rules is for systems that have a discharge. This is a sealed asset underground with an inlet pipe and no outlet. So building regulations still apply, don't get me wrong, but general binding rules do not apply when a property is served with a cesspit. And as I say, cesspit is a huge holding tank installed underground. It takes the toilet water, shower, dishwasher, washing machine, all the dirty and grey water. The cesspit fills up, and when it fills to the top, it needs to be emptied. It's no more complex than that. It fills, it needs to be emptied. And that process, if the cesspit is sized appropriately, could happen between 6 and 8 times a year. £300 to £400 per empty. It's a perfectly legal system, but it's quite an expensive system. It's expensive to install and it's expensive to keep going purely because of the emptying costs. In the old days, the customers would only know it's full if they lifted the manhole cover on top, or if they started to get nasty niffs, or if their facility started to work poorly because the water was going all the way back to the house. Modern day cesspits have clever little devices where they send a text message to the owner to give them a couple of days grace. So it's a lot better. But to put that in context, cesspits are the last resort because they're deemed as the least environmentally friendly asset, simply because if there's ever a structural breach, whether that be on the side walls or the base of this cesspit, you've got untreated wastewater going straight to ground. It could hit a fissure, go to an aquifer, go to a surface water, and you've got a pollution event. So to get one of these signed off by building control, you have to demonstrate that you've tried every other off-mains drainage asset first, and then and only then will you be able to get one of these signed off. And to put that in context, we've only installed 2 of these in the past 10 years. They're getting harder and harder to get signed off. So perfectly legal, but only in a tiny proportion of scenarios where nothing else will work. So we jump from the least environmentally friendly, which is a cesspit. We're now looking at the most environmentally friendly asset, which is a sewage treatment plant. Or to give it its proper name, it's a package treatment plant, because what we're looking at now, although it's only one asset, it's broken down into compartments. And if we go back 60, 70 years, If a property had a Rolls-Royce treatment works in their property, they would have a septic tank going to a filter bed, going to a reed bed, going to a discharge to a river. So there'd be different component parts. It'd be quite good treatment, to be fair. And what we have in front of us now is a better system than that, all housed inside one asset. So if we go right to left, we look at that first compartment. What that actually is, it's called a primary zone, and that's effectively a little septic tank within a treatment plant. And in a septic tank, separation occurs. I'm glad we've had this before lunch, by the way, because I won't be too gross, but we have to talk factually. What happens in a septic tank when there are periods of calm? So typically when we're at work or when we're at sleep at night and no facilities are being used, natural separation occurs where the dense material will, under gravity, fall to the bottom and create a sludge layer. And the items that naturally float, so fat, oil, grease, rags, will rise to the top and form a scum layer or a crust layer. And what's left in the middle is slightly cleaner water with slightly less bits in, if I can phrase it like that. And that element is called clarified liquor, which is a dreadful label, but that's just what it's called. That middle section of slightly cleaner water under gravity goes into the second chamber, which is called a treatment zone. And this is super clever. So you'll look on top of that diagram and you'll see that little fan. That's not always physically on top of a treatment plant. It's just there so I can talk to you about it today. That's called a blower box. That can be up to 10 meters away from a treatment plant. It makes a bit of a humming noise because it is introducing air 24/7 into that treatment zone of a sewage treatment plant. So always the middle zone. That encourages growth of a good bug called biomass, and biomass regenerates all the time. And every time it does, it gets cleaner and cleaner. It deals with everything that we put into a sewage treatment plant. Unbelievably clever. It needs what we need to grow. It needs food and water, which we have introduced in the first primary zone, but it needs air. So that's why that blower box is there on a treatment plant to introduce it. It combines, there are little plastic things called media bale inside that middle zone. The good bugs live on those little plastic media sections, and that's how the treatment process occurs. Unbelievably clever. It then, after it reaches a certain height in that chamber, it then gravity falls into the final settlement chamber, and that chamber's there for anything that's managed to get through those first chambers. It settles in that, so any tiny suspended solids, anything that's got through. So what leaves a sewage treatment plant is colourless and odourless. So it looks as if you've just run a tap in the sink in the house, but it's not pure water. It's between 95 and 98%. So it's pretty good, but it's not pure. So the customer isn't even allowed to store that to water their plants. But what it does give the asset owner is a host of legal ways of getting rid of that treated effluent as it leaves that sewage treatment plant. So it can compliantly go to ground, it can go to a conventional soakaway, drainage field, a borehole soakaway, it can go to a free-flowing watercourse, it can go to a seasonal watercourse, it can go to an above-ground drainage mound. It just gives the most amount of options for the asset owner, for the property, to legally get rid of that treated effluent. And that's why most of new systems installed today are sewage treatment plants. And I imagine over the next 10 to 15 years, they will be the only asset that get installed for off-mains drainage systems. Because there is air being introduced, because there are moving parts inside that, a sewage treatment plant needs an annual service. The annual service makes sure that it's working, as you would hope, but also it maintains the warranty from the manufacturer. If you miss a service, the manufacturer's warranty is invalidated immediately, and therefore it's a risk, a financial risk. If anything goes wrong, you're on the hook, or the asset owner's on the hook rather than the manufacturer. So you could be looking at 150-ish pounds to have a service, and another 150-ish pounds if the attending engineer says that it needs to be emptied. Typically, the empty is once a year, but it may be that there's less people in the house. then it may be to stretch to 18 months or 24 months. But the reason why this whole thing is so important is that specifically in a property transaction, we are looking for evidence of the servicing, we're looking for evidence of the emptying, because that creates a picture that the system is being well maintained. But also, if you've got copies of the documents from the service engineer, you can see if there's been any problems, and more importantly, if they've been addressed. So it serves as a fantastic audit trail to check the system has been maintained and also see what's happened to it over the years. So it's really important to get those documents. Still, the most common off-mains drainage system that we see from a surveying perspective is a septic tank. And septic tanks can be 1, 2, or 3 chambers in sequence. There are no moving parts. They work by displacement, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But what we're looking at in this illustration is the most common of septic tanks, which is a 2-chamber structure. So we're now going from left to right. So the properties waste comes into chamber number 1. You'll see these dip pipes, which are inverted T's. They were originally made of clay. Modern day, they're made of a reinforced plastic. And on the inlet pipe on chamber 1, it's designed so everything coming into that chamber 1 hits that T pipe, and it can only fall downwards under gravity. It's not giving it a choice where to enter that chamber. And that is specifically so that scum layer on top is not disturbed. On the flip side, so on the exit T pipe on chamber 1, that ensures that only that middle section of slightly cleaner separated water is allowed to go through to the next chamber, and then the process repeats. So effectively, the more chambers a septic tank has, the slightly cleaner it gets each time. If the dip pipes aren't in place, that is a problem. It means there is no control as the water and waste enters it, so it can churn up the crust layer, which is a negative. But also, if the T pieces are missing on the outlet, whether it's internally or on the final chamber, it means all that fat, oil, and grease that has come to the top of the liquid, instead of being retained inside the chamber, is allowed to exit. It's bad enough if that's inside the septic tank, but if the final outlet T piece is missing or damaged, that means that all that fat, oil, and grease is allowed to exit the septic tank and communicate with whatever it's going to, whether it be soak away in the garden or whether it's illegally discharging into some sort of ditch, river, or stream. So a septic tank is important for separation, but there's no treatment. The soak away that it should be discharging to is where the treatment occurs. So 2 component parts, but they absolutely need each other. And when I talk about working through displacement, if 100 litres comes into a septic tank, it pushes out 100 litres. So if there are any issues inside that septic tank, for example, if the septic tank is massively undersized for a property, it means there is insufficient capacity for the separation process to occur. So as the new wastewater comes in, it will push out unseparated waste, which will include the matter that should be retained. So when we do a survey and we say it's half the size it should be, you know immediately that the wrong material will have been allowed to have been pushed out into the soakaway, or worst case, into a ditch, river, or stream, and that will be a pollution event. So it's so important that it's sized correctly. It's so important it's in good condition. It's so important the dip pipes are on, and it's so important that it should only ever be discharging to ground via a soakaway. These 2 examples are still septic tanks, but in the 60s and 70s, instead of brick or concrete structures, glass reinforced plastic was used, and the alpha tank, and we may know it as the onion tank purely because of its shape, was introduced. I'm not affiliated to any manufacturer in the UK, but Clargester was the first manufacturer of this particular plant. It's just a fact. I'm not trying to big them up in any way. So if you see on a report that the property is served by an onion tank, this is what we're talking about. It is an onion shape, and it still has 2 compartments, but instead of it being left to right horizontally, these tanks have vertical chambers. And this is measured with a hugely deep inlet pipe. They're over 1 meter long, and it takes the waste underneath this little light shade, which is called a conical baffle. And then separation occurs, and only the separated water is allowed to go through tiny little perforations in that baffle. It hits the level of the outlet pipe, goes to the soakaway, and away it goes. So there are, again, no moving parts. It's just separation, not treatment, and it relies on the soakaway for the treatment. So this is what I said at the start. It's really important to understand what the small sewage discharge element of this regulatory reform is. So it stipulates for a property to be compliant, if it's discharging to ground, it can have no more than 2,000 litres of water per day going to ground to be compliant. If it's a discharge to a surface water, it can be up to 5,000 litres per day. So I'm not saying in default, if it's more than 2,000 going to ground or more than 5,000 litres a day going to a surface water, it's not compliant. What I'm saying is that they will need to have a permit attached to that discharge. We are talking about the smaller discharges where the general binding rule says you don't need a permit if you can demonstrate X, Y, and Z. And part of that X, Y, and Z is that it's below the certain number of litres per day. And the way that is calculated is down to maximum occupancy of a property. So the example you can see in front of you is a typical 3-bed property. The way the maximum occupancy is calculated, whether you agree with it or I do, it's irrelevant. This is what the regs state at the moment. It's number of bedrooms plus 2. So a 3-bedroom house has a maximum potential occupancy of 5 persons. The current per person daily water usage is 150 litres. So for a 3-bed property, we're looking at 5 persons at 150 litres each. We're looking at 750 litres daily discharge. And we're not saying it is using 750. We're saying that's what it would be using if it was fully occupied. 750, clearly less than 2,000, well within the general binding rules, no problem at all. If we have 2 properties, it'll be 1,500. But unfortunately, if we went to 3-bedroom properties sharing a septic tank, which is extremely common, there's loads of communal systems in England, then that would take us to 2,250 litres per day. That would take us over the 2,000. Therefore, that discharge would be subject to a permit to discharge from the Environment Agency. Currently, for a domestic discharge, current timeframes are about 4 months. You carry on using the system, you apply to the Environment Agency, explain the system, give them a description of the layout, where it's discharging, how many properties are connecting, how many bedrooms. They double check the calculations, and they may turn around and say, it's only just over, don't worry about it. That's fine. At least there's an audit trail to the asset owners to say that you've correctly made a formal approach to request a permit, but the permitting team have come back and say, under these circumstances, you don't need one. So that's fine. So at least everyone is covered. But if you go over 5,000 litres to a surface water, not only do you need a permit, but in the eyes of the Environment Agency, that's classed as a commercial discharge. And therefore, the permit takes a bit longer and it costs a lot more money. For a domestic permit, I think it's about £180 at the moment. And if you don't need a permit, they send you that money back. So, I mean, it's as fair can be. If you're over 5,000 litres, there is no leeway. If you're 5,001 litres, it's a hard stop. You are over the 5,000. It's a commercial discharge. It's therefore due to have a permit. And then it's a per situation fee. It's a bespoke fee per situation. And the last one we did was a care home in Staffordshire, and that was just over £6,000 for the permit and £2,000 a year thereafter to allow an officer to come out and take some samples. So there's a huge difference between domestic small discharges and larger commercial, but the general binding rules is specifically focused on the smaller domestic discharges. So what does the GBR mean to property owners? There's definitely a greater emphasis, whether that's the asset owner, whether that's you guys, effectively all the property professionals potentially involved in the transaction are, safe to say, aware that these regs exist. They might not have an intimate knowledge of it, and that's fair enough, but that's what people and companies like mine are here for. But there's certainly, over the last 10 years, there's been less and less circumstances of non-compliant systems being missed. And that's a pure consequence of pretty much everyone telling their clients to have a survey carried out. So it's becoming a bit more of a norm. Whereas when this first came out in 15, no one really knew about these systems. They didn't really budget to have a survey. It was considered an inconvenience. No one had really thought about it. Don't get me wrong, that still happens now. And there's still the odd circumstance where we're introduced way too late in a transaction process, at the proverbial 11th hour. But more times than not now, there's an introduction to the off-mains drainage system earlier on in the transaction. Therefore, there's more time to deal with any imperfections, any repairs, any system replacements. There's a lot more time. Therefore, it's a lot calmer. So, and therefore, if it's being addressed more and more, it means the environment is being protected more and more. So that is the whole purpose of this reform. So it is working. Safe to say it's taken longer than anticipated, but it is working. And that's due to lovely people like yourselves telling clients to get the survey done and create peace of mind. That's what it's all about. So, what is a non-compliant system? The big hitters are, as we said at the start, the main catalyst for this reform, septic tanks discharging to surface waters. There are no known numbers for this. We know across the UK, 4% of housing stock is connected to off-mains drainage systems, private off-mains drainage systems. So 1 in 25 properties. But that's not an even split between the 4 countries in the UK. So there's no actual specific numbers available for how many septic tanks are discharging illegally. There are estimates ranging from tens of thousands to a couple of 100,000, but either way, we know that it's way too many. That's why the reform was put in place. But there are, as I say, there are 23 rules that make up the general binding rules, and they form the big hitters to get rid of those illegally discharging septic tanks, but also really important ones like, is the system actually working? Even if it's discharging compliantly and adequately to the right place, is it actually functioning? Is the asset watertight? Is it functioning as per the manufacturer's design specifications? If it can't function as designed, then it's non-compliant. So there are loads of different things that need to be checked, and there's no way in the world a homeowner is going to have an appreciation of applying these rules in the real world. So that's not a sales pitch for me. It's just applying some realism. A specialist firm needs to come in to check that all these rules are either being adhered with or not. In the first 5 years when this was released, the idea was that it was a 5-year or 60-month time frame for all these non-compliant systems to be assessed and then addressed if they were non-compliant. So we were wondering what was going to happen from the end of that 5 years as we approached January 2020, because not many people knew about it. It was a slow burner. There was no marketing. There was no proactivity of getting this message out there to the asset owners. So there was a couple of tweaks after the 5-year period, and that's where this time frame, that middle bullet point there, came in. So the government website stipulates that a fair and reasonable time frame in a situation where a septic tank has been discovered to be discharged into a surface water is 12 months to address that problem. Now, to me, that seems too long. If you've got a septic tank which doesn't create any treatment, knowingly discharging directly to a surface water, that is a pollution event there and then. So in the real world, my belief is that 12 months should be shortened to 3 months, because that still allows enough time to get a couple of quotes, make sure the contractor is competent, and then make sure that you have got the ability to get a good contractor who normally has a 4-week lead-in period to come and do the job. So 12 months is more than reasonable, but at least it's there. The negative to that 12 months is that no one is monitoring that 12-month clock. So if we found a non-compliant system in a property transaction, fine. Okay, maybe £15,000 put aside in a client account, ready for the owners to come in, source a contractor and have that work done. But no one is monitoring that. And that's a real shame. And maybe that will change in time, but at the moment, no one has been asked to make the Environment Agency aware that a non-compliant system has been discovered. And in default, the 12-month clock isn't being monitored. It's a real shame. A non-compliant system is supposed to form the condition of sale. That's on the government website as well. But also the government website states that the asset owner should be providing information regarding the system's condition, a description of the system, a location plan of the system, copies of all the maintenance records. And I know firsthand, because this is all we do, that that is not happening. For example, for every 20 pre-purchase surveys that we carry out, 19 of those, so 95%, are commissioned by the purchaser. But if you read the government website, 100% of the onus is upon the seller to proactively provide this information, but only 1 in 20 are having a survey carried out. That's been happening for the last 10 years, so I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. But it's interesting. It's still buyer beware, but the government website says the seller should be on the front foot. So there's a bit of a contrast there. Not this important, but this is Paul, one of my engineers. This is just what happens during a septic tank survey. I'm out there because they are concrete covers and they're crazy heavy. What Paul's got there, he's looking on his phone, which is Bluetooth to the GoPro, which is 2 meters inside that septic tank. Paul is just moving that camera around on that telescopic pole, and he's checking to see the interior condition of that septic tank. We're then able to ascertain if there's any structural issues, any cracks, fractures, any render missing, if there's any tree roots entering the system, any water escaping or coming in. And it also allows us to measure the capacity of that septic tank to make sure it's adequate for the property. So that's just how it looks in the real world. So again, this is a bit gross, but it's important. So please let me carry on. The activities that are carried out, the first one is checking the liquid level. And you think, well, is that important? Yes, it is. So before any of our equipment has come out of the van, we are just having a look inside that septic tank to see where the level is. So if you imagine, if we class the outlet pipe, that exit pipe, as a clock face, and at the bottom, you've therefore got 6 o'clock, the liquid should be sitting just at that 6 o'clock, just perhaps a lip above, a centimetre above that 6 o'clock level on a clock face. That means that it is operating adequately. That's where it should be. If we go there and the liquid level is higher than that, we know straight away that we need to concentrate our efforts on where the water is escaping to. Because if the level is too high in the tank, it means it can't get away. So it might be something simple like some sort of soft blockage in the pipework as it exits the tank, or it could be something fundamentally wrong, such as a failed soakaway. There might be a collapsed pipe. There might be a mass tree root infestation, which is causing a block in that pipe. But either way, something's not right. It's not performing as it should, and therefore there's an issue. On the flip side of that, if we go there and the level is too low, that's more of a concern, because that means there must be a structural breach somewhere in that tank where the water hits a certain level and then it's escaping out the walls of the tank and it's never reaching the outlet height to go where it should be going. So that means the subsoils around the tank will be saturated. It means there will be pollutants around that area, and it could make the whole area unsafe. So that's why that very first task is critical, because it tells us exactly where we need to focus our attention. We then look for general condition. We look for those T pieces that we talked about that control the in and outflow. We calculate the tank's capacity. Where possible, where there is access for a camera, we put the camera, the CCTV camera, into the outlet, and we follow the pipe to see where that tank is discharging to. Sometimes it's so dirty we can't see, but there is a transponder on the camera head, so we know where it's traveling, we know how deep it is, we know how far it is. So even if we lose vision, we know where it is in the garden, or if it's gone onto the neighbour into third-party land, so we can still trace it. And one of the most important ones is conducting dye tests to ascertain where the rainwater systems are on the property. The rainwater to a property should be going somewhere separate from the foul system. But unfortunately, in 35% of every single survey we've ever conducted, there are called cross connections, and that's where the rainwater has been tapped into the foul system. What that means in the real world, during rainfall, in if you have a cesspit, you're just going to fill it with rainwater. So you're going to have to empty it more often, and you're going to be paying a lot of money to empty rainwater. In a septic tank scenario, you are going to cause a hydraulic overload. So where a septic tank is sized appropriately to allow that actual separation process to occur, if you have rainwater artificially coming into it, you are going to churn it up, you are going to push it through the outlet pipe before it's had a chance to separate. And if it's going to a soakaway, it will push all the solid matter into it, and it will cause it to exhaust and fail artificially quickly. But more worryingly, if it's a scenario where it's illegally connecting to a surface water, you are going to be causing a pollution. Even more worryingly is if you have cross connections on a sewage treatment plant, because the majority of sewage treatment plants are legally discharging to a surface water. If you have rainwater cross connections, again, you're going to push it all through before those good bugs have had a chance to treat the effluent. So you're having untreated effluent going straight to a surface water in most circumstances. So again, a pollution event. So sometimes dealing with the cross connection can be as simple as tweaking the way the guttering goes from left to right rather than right to left, for example. But unfortunately, in some circumstances, it involves internally changing the plumbing, installing lots of new pipework, installing brand new cell rainwater specific soakways, and you can add thousands and thousands just diverting the cross connections, irrespective of what condition the foul system is in. So it's so important to check for rainwater cross connections. So, takeaways, you've been so good. Are there any questions? I've been talking for 48 minutes or however long. I'm so sorry. There's been no questions. I'm just going to plow on if that's okay, if no one's got anything to say. So, key takeaways from this session is that I can talk forever, but that's not really that important. Big hitters, you can't discharge a septic tank to a surface water. Only treated effluent can discharge to a surface water. The only way to achieve treated effluent is to have a sewage treatment plant. If you had a septic tank, discharging into a watercourse, you were given that first 5 years when this regulatory reform was introduced to have it sorted out. So it should have been replaced in that first 5 years. We all know that didn't happen because no one really knew about it. So we're in this realm now where if a non-compliant system is discovered, we have got this 12 months to sort it out. There was a lot of confusion about 1983, and to put some context around that, the first British standard to cater for wastewater treatment systems was introduced in 1983, and therefore it was deemed very unfair to retrospectively apply modern regs to pre-83 systems. So with that comes some confusion. Some people think it's a pre-1983 system, therefore it's automatically non-compliant. And the other side of the coin is it's pre-1983, it's absolutely fine. Either way, they need to be surveyed. They might be fine. Maybe that it's a septic tank discharged into an old-fashioned pit-style soakaway that wouldn't be allowed today. But if it's functioning and not polluting, if it's pre-83, it won't need to be changed, and it won't need a permit because it predates it and it's working. But if it's a pre-1983 system and it's a septic tank discharged into a surface water, that's still non-compliant. Doesn't matter when it was installed. So that still needs to be addressed. So the pre-83 is important. If it's an old style system, but it's working, that pre-83 gives it that bit of grace that you don't need to bring it up to today's spec if it can be demonstrated that it's functioning and not polluting. So that's really important. And then the other big hitter is a non-compliant system should be addressed as a condition of sale during a property transaction. That is fantastic. It means it's got to be addressed. Where this stops short, and it's crying shame, is that it doesn't go that one stage further to suggest or state how that should look in the real world from a financial perspective. Should a non-compliant, say it's £20,000 for sake of using a big fat round number, should that be an equal 50-50 contribution from seller to purchaser? Should it mean that the seller should have the whole system replaced before it goes to market or before exchange occurs? They should, in my opinion, it should have gone a stage further. So it's imperfect, but at least this is written in there. So it's got to be addressed. Is it going to be held in the client account? Is the seller going to sort it out? Are they going to pay half each? At least it focuses the mind that that system is going to be addressed there and then or in the near future. So it is still fantastic from a environmental protection perspective. And again, in the real world, if you're dealing with a property transaction and the information comes back that a septic tank system was installed after January 2015 in England, then it should look like this. The white asset is a septic tank. All shapes are available, but we're just looking at the onion tank for consistency of this presentation. The little black box in front of that is called a distribution chamber. So the separated wastewater goes into that distribution chamber, and from that distribution chamber, it evenly and calmly disperses that water into a drainage field. Now, a drainage field's correct label is a subsurface infiltration system. What it is 4-inch pipework with perforations or slots around the bottom of the pipe. The system is installed almost flat, so it's a gradient of a 1 meter fall every 200-meter length. So it's the idea behind that is that the water trickles through it at a really slow and calm pace. If it's installed too steep, all the water will rush to the end of the drainage field and it will just pool. That's pointless. The way a drainage field works is that underneath the pipe is a bedding of clean stone. So when the separated wastewater trickles through the holes or slots in the bottom of the drainage field pipework, it hits the clean stone. Air will be able to get through the ground because drainage fields are only allowed to go in a meter deep, and that's the maximum that oxygen can reach it through the ground. So you've got oxygen hitting it. You've got the food and water that's in the septic tank. So the biomass that grows inside a sewage treatment plant will grow on the stones under that pipe bedding, and it will get cleaner the further it drops under gravity. It will then hit an aquifer and get away. So the septic tank is the separation, the drainage field is the treatment, and that is the only compliant design for a septic tank in England installed after 2015. So if we're in a scenario where they go, yeah, got a new system, I've got a septic tank in, and it goes to a pit-style soakaway halfway down the garden, when was it installed? 2019. Okay, then. The only possible way that can be legal is if the Environment Agency have issued a permit to discharge against that soakaway. I'm being flippant, that should never happen because this whole regulation is about septic tank only being allowed to discharge to a drainage field. So there would have to be extenuating circumstances for the discharge arrangement to be anything other than a traditional drainage field. So that's how it should look. From not sales pitch, from our perspective, Gemma kindly said at the start of this about on LinkedIn, I spend a third of my time, approximately a third, either posting on LinkedIn, giving little updates, little case studies. Hopefully some will resonate. Hopefully some are amusing, some are interesting, maybe not, maybe I'm failing dismally, I don't know. But part of what I do via LinkedIn, I just get questions all day long about we're dealing with this transaction, we've received this quote, does it seem fair? Does the scope of work seem compliant and reasonable? Have you heard of this contractor? Just using me and my company as a safety net, and I absolutely love that. And the reason I say that, and it's completely genuine, is that I've been in this sector 27 years. It's all I've ever done, and I absolutely love it. What I don't love is people taking the mickey, taking the advantage of any perceived grey areas that may or may not be within this regulatory reform, and then using that to trade up on a site or pick on a vulnerable customer and say, you don't need this or you do need this, and then an awful piece of work happens or an inexpensive piece of work happens that someone's told is perfect, but it's not. I hate that. So any chance that we can capture it before any physical disturbance has taken place or any monies have changed hand, let's do that. So please, you do that as well. Use and abuse our knowledge. That's what we're here for. You don't have to use us. You don't have to formally appoint us. If you just want to ask a question, please do so. Just bounce off me. Use me as your free resource. That's what we're here for. We've created a free guide. We've issued it 3,000 times already. I can give it to Jamie and Gemma if they'd like to issue it to everyone. We've translated the general binding rules from the website into an Excel document, so it's easy for you and your clients to understand and use as a tick box. We've created private drainage questionnaires that in Word, so you can brand it your own company and get it out. And the whole idea is we are trying to create best practice. We are trying to create peace of mind. We're trying to increase the base knowledge so there are no excuses to miss the opportunity to capture a non-compliant system, or on the flip side, confirm that the system in place is absolutely fine. So we're just trying to create awareness. So I'm very grateful to Gemma and Jamie for this opportunity today, because even if I'm only saying one thing that you didn't know before, that's something. If you take it away to your colleague and they learn one thing, that's fantastic. I know it's only septic tanks, but it's so critical. It could be a £20,000 opportunity missed if someone doesn't have a survey, they move in, then find a problem. They've lost that chance to sort that out during the transaction. So thank you so much for your time. Please follow us on LinkedIn and ask a million questions now, or come through LinkedIn and find me and ask questions. We are literally here to help as much as we can. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, James. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, first of all. It was really, really interesting. I know we come from the drainage and water world, so it's probably our world, but it's just exceptional, the amount of information that you do share with people. And obviously you're an expert in the field, so people can reach out to you if they do have any issues, even if it's just one question. It's brilliant.
Yep, please do.
I've got one question actually, and I've just saved it till the end. What would you say the main reason was why a private drainage fails? Is it maintenance? Is it because it's not the right size for the number of occupants in the property, or is it a mixture of all sorts?
The most common one is that it's just come to the end of its natural life. People make the assumption that it's installed once, it's installed well, it would last forever. It can't last forever. Manufacturers' warranties on the new plants are maximum 25 years. You're probably going to get 40 to 50 years out of them. But the drainage field that it connects to, you'll be lucky if you get 30 years. So then you'll need another drainage field. So yeah, but the other hit is external factors: lack of maintenance, poor installation, a rising water table, anything that's on third-party land. If it's farmland and a tractor goes through it and kills the pipework, there are 1,000 reasons they can go wrong. But if it's well maintained and you're only putting the right products in and you're getting it emptied regularly, then you're giving yourself the best chance for the best longevity of the system.
So it's a little bit like a car. You keep the paperwork to say that it's been maintained on an annual basis for however. Okay,
absolutely.
Perfect, lovely. I don't think we've got any more questions. Let me just double check. Have we got anything else in the chat? No, it's just Jamie thanking everybody for attending. Yeah, thank you for attending today, and just asking if you could fill out the feedback form as well. That'd be perfect. But thank you so much, James. Your knowledge is exceptional, and he's also put a link in for your LinkedIn page as well, so that people can follow you on there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye now.